What would you do if a police officer put handcuffs on you, right outside a bank that you actually owned? Think about that for a second. A crowded sidewalk. Dozens of people are watching. Cameras recording. Employees staring through the glass doors. And the person being arrested is the owner of the building itself. Sounds impossible, right? But on a cold Monday morning in the heart of the city, something happened that no one in that crowd would ever forget. At exactly 8:15 a.m. a black luxury sedan stopped in front of Rivergate National Bank, one of the most successful financial institutions in the state. The driver's door opened, and a tall black man stepped out wearing a dark gray suit and carrying a simple leather briefcase. His name was Marcus Reed. To everyone passing by, he looked like another businessman heading to work. No bodyguards. No special treatment. No signs of wealth. Marcus adjusted his tie and started walking toward the entrance. That was when a police cruiser pulled sharply to the curb. "Sir, stop right there," the officer shouted. Marcus paused and turned calmly. The officer stepped out quickly, his hand resting near his radio. "We received a report about a suspicious individual matching your description near this bank. Put your briefcase down." People nearby slowed down to watch. A woman with a coffee cup stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. Two security guards exchanged nervous looks. Marcus gently placed the briefcase on the ground. "Officer," he said in a calm voice, "there seems to be a misunderstanding." "Save it," the officer snapped. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Marcus did exactly that. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. That only made the situation feel stranger. Inside the bank, several employees gathered near the windows. One young teller frowned. "Why is that man being stopped?" she whispered. Outside, the officer continued questioning Marcus while checking something on his tablet. The crowd grew larger. Phones appeared. Someone started recording. Then Marcus asked a simple question. "May I make one phone call?" The officer let out a short laugh. "After I figure out who you really are," he replied. For the first time, Marcus looked directly at the officer. His expression did not change. "That phone call," he said quietly, "will change your entire day." The officer smirked, clearly thinking it was an empty warning. But what he did next would become the biggest mistake of his career. And no one standing outside Rivergate National Bank had any idea who Marcus Reed really was. Marcus never moved. He stood there with his hands where the officer had told him to keep them, his face calm and his breathing steady. It was almost as if he had expected something like this to happen. The officer, however, took Marcus's silence as a sign of guilt instead of confidence. "What are you doing at this bank?" the officer demanded. Marcus answered without hesitation. "I have business here." "What kind of business?" Marcus looked toward the bank entrance for just a second before replying, "Something important." The officer frowned. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give right now." That calm reply only made the officer more suspicious. He stepped closer and picked up Marcus's leather briefcase. "Open it." Marcus nodded politely. "Of course." Inside were only a laptop, a notebook, a few neatly organized documents, and a fountain pen. Nothing dangerous. Nothing illegal. Nothing unusual. The officer searched everything anyway, hoping to find something that would prove his suspicion. But every second that passed seemed to frustrate him even more. Around them, the crowd continued to grow. Some people whispered. Others quietly recorded with their phones. Nobody understood why such a calm businessman was being treated like a dangerous criminal. Inside the bank, employees kept watching through the tall glass windows. A young teller leaned toward her coworker. "I don't know why," she whispered, "but he looks familiar." Her coworker shrugged. "Maybe you've seen him on the news." The teller slowly shook her head. "No. I think I've seen him somewhere inside this building." Before she could think any further, her supervisor called everyone back to work. Outside, the officer folded his arms. "You still haven't explained why you're here." Marcus smiled politely. "I promise you, officer, you'll have your answer." The officer laughed. "I doubt that." At that exact moment, another police cruiser arrived. A second officer stepped out and quietly walked over. "What do we have?" The first officer answered confidently. "Possible fraud case. Subject refuses to explain why he's here." Marcus didn't interrupt. He simply listened. The second officer looked at Marcus for several long seconds. Something about him didn't seem right. Not wrong. Just different. Most people became nervous during police questioning. Some argued. Some panicked. Some begged. Marcus did none of those things. He stood perfectly still, almost like he knew something no one else did. The second officer lowered his voice. Did dispatch confirm his identity? The first officer waved the question away. I'll deal with that later. Those words would soon come back to haunt him. Inside the bank, the young teller couldn't stop thinking about Marcus's face. Finally, she quietly opened the company's employee directory on her computer. She wasn't searching for a customer. She was searching for a memory. As hundreds of employee photos appeared on her screen, she kept scrolling. Then, her hands suddenly froze above the mouse. Her eyes became wide. She quickly looked back toward the front windows. Then back at the computer. Then outside again. In a trembling voice, she whispered just 4 words. "Oh, this can't be." Without saying another word, she jumped from her chair and hurried toward the branch manager's office. Outside, Marcus calmly looked at the officer one more time. "You still have time," he said quietly. "One phone call can prevent a mistake you'll never forget." The officer only smiled. "You've already had enough chances." But upstairs inside the bank, someone had just discovered a secret that was about to change everything. Marcus didn't say another word. He simply looked toward the bank entrance, then back at the officer. There was no fear on his face. No anger. Just patience. That quiet confidence began to make a few people in the crowd uncomfortable. If this man was hiding something, why wasn't he trying to run? The officer crossed his arms. "I've met people like you before," he said. "You think staying quiet makes you look smart." Marcus answered softly. "No, officer. Staying calm helps people avoid making mistakes." The officer smirked. "The only person making mistakes today is you." Without another warning, he picked up his radio and requested permission to detain Marcus for further questioning. Several people in the crowd exchanged worried looks. An elderly man standing near the bus stop quietly shook his head. "This doesn't feel right," he murmured. A young woman beside him nodded. "He's been respectful this whole time." Another person whispered, "Why would someone dressed like that cause trouble outside a bank?" Questions were spreading faster than answers. Inside the bank, the young teller hurried into the branch manager's office without even knocking. The manager looked up from his desk. "Emily, what's wrong?" She struggled to catch her breath. I think the man outside." The manager frowned. "What about him?" "I think we need to check something. Right now." The manager walked to the window. From the second floor, he could clearly see the officer standing over Marcus. The scene looked serious. "What exactly am I looking at?" he asked. Emily lowered her voice. "I've seen that man before." The manager looked at Marcus again. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. "But I don't know from where." Instead of guessing, the manager opened the bank's secure internal system. He typed a few letters. Nothing. He tried another search. Still nothing. Emily watched the screen nervously. There has to be something. Outside, the officer had already made up his mind. "I'm placing you in handcuffs until we finish our investigation." A quiet gasp moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Seriously?" Marcus looked at the handcuffs for a brief moment. Then he slowly offered his wrists without resistance. The officer seemed almost surprised. "You aren't going to argue?" Marcus gave a small smile. "Would it change your decision?" "No." "Then arguing would only waste time." That answer confused even the second officer. He leaned closer to his partner. "Maybe we should slow down until dispatch confirms everything." The first officer dismissed him immediately. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Those words sounded confident. But confidence and certainty are not always the same thing. As the handcuffs clicked into place, several employees inside the bank stepped away from their desks to watch. The lobby had become strangely quiet. Even customers stopped talking. Everyone felt that something was wrong. No one could explain why. Then, the manager's computer made a soft notification sound. A file had finally appeared. Emily leaned closer. The manager opened it. For a second, neither of them spoke. His eyes widened. He looked at the screen. Then at Marcus outside. Then back at the screen again. His face suddenly turned pale. Without saying a single word, he grabbed his office phone and dialed a number marked Executive Priority. The person who answered spoke only one sentence. "What happened to Mr. Reed?" The branch manager didn't answer right away. He stared through the office window at Marcus Reed standing quietly outside in handcuffs. Then he looked back at the computer screen. His hands were suddenly shaking. On the other end of the phone, the voice spoke again. "Hello. What's happening?" The manager finally found his voice. I think we've made a very serious mistake." The person on the line didn't ask another question. Instead, they calmly said, "Don't do anything else. I'm on my way." The call ended. Emily looked at the manager with growing concern. "Who was that?" He swallowed hard. "Our regional executive." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "The regional executive?" He nodded. "And I've never heard him sound that serious." Outside, the first officer noticed several employees gathering behind the glass doors. He smiled to himself. "Looks like everyone wants to watch." Marcus remained completely still. His briefcase was still lying beside the patrol car. His suit was slightly wrinkled from the handcuffs, but his expression hadn't changed at all. The second officer stepped closer. "Sir," he asked quietly, "is there someone we should contact for you?" Marcus looked at him for a moment. "There is." "Who?" "My assistant." The first officer laughed loudly. "Your assistant?" Several people in the crowd looked at each other. The officer continued. "That's a new one." Marcus didn't react. "My assistant knows exactly what to do." The officer shook his head. "I think you've watched too many movies." Marcus simply replied, "No, officer. I've attended too many meetings." That answer sounded strange. Simple. But strange. The second officer couldn't explain why, but something about Marcus's words didn't sound like an ordinary excuse. Meanwhile, inside the bank, employees had stopped pretending to work. Whispers spread across every department. "Who is he? Why did the regional executive leave another meeting? Why is everyone suddenly nervous?" No one had answers. Only questions. Emily quietly reopened the executive profile that had appeared on the secure system. Most of the information was restricted. But one small photograph remained visible. She slowly placed the photo beside the window. Then she looked outside. Back to the photo. Outside again. "There is no way," she whispered. She turned the monitor toward the branch manager. He closed his eyes for a brief second. When he opened them again, his face had lost all color. "We have to stop this," he said. He hurried toward the lobby. But before he reached the front doors, another problem appeared. The first officer had already decided to move Marcus into the patrol car. The crowd immediately became louder. Phones were raised even higher. Someone quietly said, "This is getting out of control." The second officer spoke once more. "Maybe we should wait just a few more minutes." His partner didn't even look at him. "No." He opened the back door of the patrol car. "Get in." Marcus glanced toward the bank entrance. For the first time, something caught his attention. The branch manager was running outside. Not walking. Running. His tie was loose. His face was filled with panic. He raised one hand and shouted across the parking lot. "Officer, wait." The officer frowned. "What now?" The manager stopped only a few feet away, trying to catch his breath. Before he could say another word, 3 black SUVs slowly turned into the bank parking lot. Every conversation stopped. Every phone pointed toward the arriving vehicles. The first officer looked confused. The second officer quietly whispered, "I don't think those people are here by accident." As the first SUV came to a stop, its doors opened together. And the first person to step out looked directly at Marcus Reed before saying words that made the branch manager's heart sink. "Mr. Reed, we're so sorry we're late." The parking lot became so quiet that even the sound of the SUV engine seemed loud. Every pair of eyes turned toward the people stepping out of the vehicles. They weren't rushing. They walked with calm confidence, dressed in sharp business suits, each wearing a small company badge. Whatever meeting they had left behind, it had clearly been important. The man leading the group walked straight toward Marcus. Without looking at the officers first, he stopped in front of Marcus and lowered his head slightly. "Mr. Reed," he said respectfully, "we came as soon as we got the call." The words echoed across the parking lot. The crowd looked at one another in confusion. "Mr. Reed?" The first officer frowned. "Who are you people?" he demanded. The man turned slowly. "My name is Daniel Brooks," he replied calmly. "I'm the regional executive for Rivergate National Bank." For the first time since the encounter began, the officer looked slightly unsure. "And why are you here?" Daniel glanced at Marcus before answering. "Because Mr. Reed asked for assistance." The officer folded his arms. "So this man works for your bank?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, He looked at the handcuffs around Marcus's wrists. His expression changed. "What happened here?" he asked quietly. Before Marcus could speak, the officer answered with complete confidence. "We received a report about suspicious activity. I'm following procedure." Daniel nodded politely. "I understand." Then he asked one simple question. "Did you verify his identity before placing him in handcuffs?" The officer hesitated for just a second. "We're still investigating." Daniel didn't argue. He simply looked toward the second officer, who avoided eye contact. Something about the silence made the crowd even more curious. Inside the bank, employees were now standing shoulder to shoulder behind the glass windows. Nobody was pretending to work anymore. Even customers had forgotten why they came. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who was Marcus Reed? Marcus finally broke the silence. "Officer," he said calmly, "may I make that phone call now?" The first officer gave a short laugh. "I don't think another phone call is going to help you." Marcus smiled politely. "It isn't for me." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Then who is it for?" Marcus looked directly into his eyes. "It's for you." Those 6 words left the officer speechless for a moment. Then he shook his head. "I'm done listening." Marcus didn't argue. He simply looked at Daniel. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone. Without saying another word, he dialed a number from memory. The call lasted less than 20 seconds. "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "It has already happened." He listened for a few moments. "I understand." Then he ended the call. Marcus looked at him. "They're coming." Daniel nodded once. "They're already on their way." The first officer smiled as if none of it mattered. "Are you two trying to scare me?" Neither man answered. That silence was far more unsettling than any threat. Just then, inside the bank, every executive office phone began ringing at the exact same moment. One after another. Reception. Compliance. Corporate relations. Legal. Human resources. The sound spread through the building like a wave. Employees looked around in complete confusion. The branch manager slowly lowered his head. He had worked at Rivergate National Bank for almost 20 years. He had only seen something like this happen once before. And it was during the biggest leadership meeting in the bank's history. He looked through the front glass doors at Marcus. Then he whispered words that no one else was supposed to hear. "They know." Outside, the first officer still believed he was in control. But less than 5 minutes from that parking lot, someone far more important had already received the same phone call. And they were coming with answers that no one saw coming. Less than a minute passed, but it felt much longer. The parking lot was still full of people. Nobody left. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Every person standing there could feel that something unusual was about to happen, even if they didn't know what it was. Marcus remained exactly where he was. The handcuffs were still on his wrists. His briefcase still rested beside the patrol car. Yet somehow, he looked like the calmest person in the entire parking lot. The first officer noticed the growing silence. He looked around at the crowd and forced a confident smile. "Show's over," he called out. "Everyone can go back to their business." No one moved. Instead, more people stopped to watch. Customers walking toward the bank slowed down. People across the street crossed over just to see what was happening. Questions were spreading faster than answers. Inside the bank, the atmosphere had completely changed. The branch manager hurried through the lobby, speaking quietly with department supervisors. "No one says anything to the media," he reminded them. "No one guesses. And no one leaves the building until we understand what's happening." Every employee nodded. Emily stood near the front windows, unable to take her eyes off Marcus. She still couldn't understand one thing. If he really was who she thought he was, why hadn't he simply told the officers? Why stay silent? Why let everything go this far? Those questions kept running through her mind. Outside, Daniel Brooks stepped beside Marcus. In a low voice, he asked, "Sir, are you all right?" Marcus gave a small nod. "I'm fine. I'm sorry this happened." Marcus smiled gently. "Daniel, today isn't about me." Daniel looked surprised. "It isn't?" Marcus glanced toward the officers. "It's about choices." Daniel understood exactly what he meant. People reveal their true character when they believe no one important is watching. The first officer interrupted them. "If you're finished talking, this investigation is continuing." Marcus looked at him calmly. "I never asked you to stop doing your job." The officer frowned. "Then what's with all the phone calls?" Marcus answered with complete honesty. I wanted the right people to know what happened. That sentence made several people in the crowd exchange nervous looks. The second officer quietly stepped closer to his partner. I really think we should verify everything again. The first officer sighed impatiently. You've been saying that for the last 10 minutes. Because something feels wrong. Nothing's wrong. The second officer looked toward Daniel, regional executive, then toward the branch manager, running outside, then toward Marcus. Still completely calm. He lowered his voice even further. Does that sound normal to you? For the first time, the first officer didn't answer immediately. A tiny seed of doubt had finally appeared. Just then, another vehicle turned into the parking lot. It wasn't another police cruiser. It wasn't another company SUV. It was a plain black sedan with dark windows. There were no company logos. No government markings. Nothing to explain why it was there. The car stopped near the entrance. Nobody stepped out right away. Every eye in the parking lot shifted toward it. Even Marcus looked in that direction. After a few long seconds, the rear door slowly opened. A silver-haired woman stepped out carrying a thin leather folder. She looked around once. Then walked straight toward Marcus without hesitation. Daniel immediately stood a little straighter. The branch manager lowered his head respectfully. Even senior employees recognized her. The first officer whispered to his partner, "Who is she?" The second officer slowly shook his head. "I don't know. But judging by everyone's reaction, I think we're about to find out who Mr. Reed really is." The woman walked with quiet confidence, never looking left or right. She wasn't rushing, yet every step seemed to make the parking lot even quieter. By the time she reached Marcus, not a single person was speaking. Even the first officer stopped talking. Something about her presence demanded attention without saying a word. She stopped in front of Marcus and looked at the handcuffs around his wrists. Then she looked at Marcus. "I'm sorry you had to wait," she said calmly. Marcus gave a small smile. "It's all right. Everyone eventually shows who they really are." The woman nodded as if she understood exactly what he meant. She then turned toward the first officer. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she said. "I'm General Counsel for Rivergate National Bank." The officer looked confused. "General, what?" "I oversee the bank's legal department." The officer folded his arms. "And why are you involved?" Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the leather folder she was carrying. Inside were several official documents. She carefully removed one page and held it in front of her. "Officer," she said politely, "before we continue, I need to ask one question." He nodded. "Did you verify Mr. Reed's identity before placing him under detention?" The officer cleared his throat. "We received a report. That wasn't my question." Her calm voice somehow carried more weight than shouting ever could. "I asked if you verified his identity." The officer hesitated. "We were in the process." Evelyn slowly closed the folder. "I understand." She stepped aside and looked toward the second officer. "Were you present during the entire interaction?" The second officer answered honestly. "Yes." "Did Mr. Reed resist?" "No." "Did he threaten anyone?" "No." "Did he attempt to leave?" "No." "Did he cooperate?" "Yes, completely." The parking lot became silent again. Every answer made the first officer look less certain. Marcus still hadn't defended himself. He hadn't accused anyone. He hadn't demanded special treatment. He had simply allowed the truth to reveal itself. That made the entire situation feel even more uncomfortable. Inside the bank, employees gathered around the front windows once again. Emily quietly whispered, "She's asking all the questions we were afraid to ask." The branch manager nodded. "And she's just getting started." Outside, Evelyn looked back at Marcus. "Mr. Reed," she asked gently, "would you like me to explain everything now?" Marcus looked around at the crowd. Some people were still recording. Others looked completely confused. He smiled politely. "Not yet." The first officer frowned. "Not yet?" Marcus nodded. "Some lessons are worth learning completely." Those words made the officer's confidence disappear just a little more. Then Evelyn reached into her folder again. This time she removed a blue document with the Rivergate National Bank executive seal across the top. She handed it to the branch manager. His eyes moved across the page. Halfway through reading it, he suddenly stood perfectly straight. Without thinking, he addressed Marcus in a completely different tone. "Good morning, Mr. Reed." The employees behind the glass noticed the change immediately. The crowd noticed it too. The first officer stared at the manager in disbelief. "What are you doing?" The manager took a slow breath before answering. "I'm speaking to the person who built this bank." The officer blinked. "What does that mean?" Before the manager could answer, every executive standing behind Marcus stepped aside at the same time. They weren't making room for someone else. They were making it unmistakably clear who everyone had been waiting for all along. And for the first time that morning, the first officer realized the man standing in handcuffs wasn't just another customer. He was someone far more important than anyone had imagined. The first officer could feel every eye in the parking lot fixed on him. Just a few minutes earlier, he had been completely sure of himself. Now, that confidence was beginning to disappear. He looked from Marcus to the branch manager, then to Evelyn Carter, hoping someone would explain what was happening. "What do you mean he built this bank?" the officer finally asked. The branch manager took a slow breath. "I mean exactly what I said." The officer frowned. "So, he works here?" The manager slowly shook his head. "No." The officer looked even more confused. "Then who is he?" Before anyone could answer, Marcus spoke for the first time in several minutes. "I think it's time." Evelyn gave a small nod. She reached into her folder one last time and removed an official executive identification card. She didn't hand it to the officer. Instead, she held it where everyone could see. The Rivergate National Bank logo appeared across the top. Below it was Marcus Reed's photograph. Under his name were 5 simple words. Chief Executive Officer. The parking lot fell completely silent. Nobody whispered. Nobody moved. Even the people recording with their phones forgot to lower their cameras. The first officer stared at the card, then at Marcus, then back at the card again. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." Marcus looked at him calmly. "Is it?" The officer's face turned pale. "You were the CEO." Marcus nodded once. "Yes." For several long seconds, the officer couldn't find a single word. Everything that had happened during the last 20 minutes rushed through his mind. Every question. Every order. Every assumption. Every decision. The crowd slowly began to understand. A man near the sidewalk quietly said, "So, this is his bank?" Another person answered, "That's what it sounds like." Inside the building, employees stood perfectly still. Many of them had never actually met Marcus in person. He rarely visited branches without notice. Most only knew him from company newsletters and annual meetings. Emily smiled quietly. "I knew I had seen his face before." The branch manager looked at Marcus with obvious regret. "I'm deeply sorry, Mr. Reed." Marcus answered kindly. "You have nothing to apologize for." The manager looked surprised. "But this happened at my branch." Marcus gave a gentle smile. "And now we'll learn from it." His calm response surprised everyone. No anger. No shouting. No threats. Only quiet confidence. The first officer finally spoke again. "Sir, if I had known," Marcus politely interrupted him. "That's exactly the point." The officer stopped talking. Marcus looked around at the crowd before continuing. "If respect depends on someone's job title." He paused. "Then it isn't really respect." Those words landed harder than anyone expected. Several people slowly lowered their phones. The second officer quietly looked at the ground. He remembered asking more than once to verify Marcus's identity. Now he understood why something had felt wrong from the very beginning. Evelyn stepped forward again. "Officer, we have already requested all security footage from this morning." The first officer swallowed nervously. "The cameras recorded everything. The entire interaction." She continued calmly. "We've also requested dispatch records, radio logs, and witness statements so the full sequence of events can be reviewed fairly." Marcus nodded. "Facts matter." The officer looked at Marcus with genuine regret. "I never meant for this to happen." Marcus met his eyes. "I believe you." The officer looked surprised. Marcus continued. "But good intentions don't erase poor decisions." Those words were impossible to argue with. Just then, another phone rang. It was the first officer's radio. He answered immediately. "This is Officer Harris." The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Harris, remain where you are." His expression changed. "We're sending your supervising captain to the scene." The parking lot became silent once again. The officer slowly lowered the radio. His hands were no longer steady. The captain wasn't coming to congratulate him. He was coming because something had gone terribly wrong. Marcus quietly picked up his briefcase from the ground. Then he looked toward the bank entrance. Let's finish this the right way. No one realized it yet. But the conversation that was about to happen inside the bank would reveal one final truth that would change far more than a single officer's career. Marcus walked through the front doors of Rivergate National Bank with the same calm expression he had worn all morning. Employees stepped aside, creating a clear path. Many lowered their heads, embarrassed by what they had witnessed. A few moments later, the supervising captain arrived outside. He reviewed the security footage on a tablet while speaking with witnesses and both officers. The video confirmed every detail. Marcus had remained respectful from beginning to end, while several simple opportunities to verify his identity had been ignored. The captain slowly removed his hat and looked at Officer Harris. "This isn't about who Mr. Reed is," he said firmly. "It's about how you chose to treat someone before knowing the facts." Officer Harris lowered his head. For the first time that day, he truly understood the weight of his decisions. Inside the bank, Marcus addressed the employees. "Every customer who walks through these doors deserves the same respect," he said. "Titles, money, and positions should never decide how people are treated." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Outside, the captain informed Officer Harris that an official internal investigation would begin immediately. His badge and equipment were collected according to department procedure while the review was completed. Marcus looked out the window for a moment, then quietly smiled. Justice hadn't come through anger. It had come through patience, truth, and the simple decision to let the facts speak for themselves. In the weeks that followed, Rivergate National Bank introduced new training for every employee and partnered with local leaders to strengthen customer service standards. Marcus didn't celebrate what had happened. Instead, he focused on making sure something good came from it. As for Officer Harris, the department completed its investigation through official procedures. The choices he made that morning had consequences, and his career came to an end. It wasn't because of one phone call alone. It was the result of every decision he made after ignoring chances to slow down, ask questions, and verify the facts. Before leaving the branch, Marcus paused near the front entrance and looked at the employees. "People will forget your title," he said with a warm smile. "They'll forget how expensive your office was. But they'll always remember how you made them feel. Treat every person with respect, even when you think no one important is watching." Those words stayed with everyone who heard them. Now it's your turn. What would you have done if you had been standing there that morning? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and believe respect should never depend on appearance or status, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And stay with us, because the next story begins with one simple mistake that changes a family's life forever.